Alright, let's take a look at a universe portrayed within a video game. Or perhaps we could take a look at a large portion of the Nintendo multiverse. Well, actually we're going to take a look at some hardware, some video game hardware, not the game itself or games. We're going to take a look at the Nintendo Family Computer, the Classic Edition or Mini Edition or whatever, often known as the Famicom or Famicom Mini, referring to this version, the special version released in 2016, the year 2016, which has become a popular item, especially the Nintendo Entertainment System version of this classic console. So I'm going to unbox this, and yeah, full achievement. In the intro, I managed to say both universe and multiverse. And we're taking a look at something that has a very important part of the multimedia, multimedia omniverse. Yeah, I squeezed an omniverse in there. Should I get bonus points for that obscure term? Nah, fuck it. The intro's already over at this point. But yeah, I'm not looking at a game this time. If I was looking at the games on this, I'd be doing Volume 1 or Volume 2 of my look at this console. But nope, here I am. I'm unboxing it, and I'm going to be talking about the unit physically, not the software in it. So this is Volume 0. This is a Volume 0. I'll get into better details on the games within it in the future. And here we have it. I unboxed it. I saw that this was available on PlayAsia. I believe it was Larry Bundy Jr. on Facebook had made a comment that PlayAsia was selling off their Nintendo Family computers. The last of their Classic Edition, mini ones, whatever. This thing right here. They're selling off the last of them. And I was like, didn't that thing sell out? That was like a big seller that Nintendo stopped making. But I guess it was just the NES, Nintendo Entertainment System version of the Classic that sold out big time. But here it is. Excuse me, my voice is kind of a little bit off at the moment. Need more Diet Cola. Anyway, so this is it. I got it from PlayAsia. They weren't sold out yet. Here it is. Maybe I should blur that because I think there's like some sort of promotional code in there that I could get something from Nintendo. Or maybe I should use the code before I upload this. I don't know. I'll just look into blurring that section. Anyway, here's it comes with a manual and promotional goodies from Nintendo. There's that, and we open some more of the cardboard. Well, we take this out of the cardboard box. Here's what we're looking for. Here's what we're looking for. This is what you really want. Look at those tiny controllers. Yeah, if you get the North American version, you get full-size controllers with your tiny console. But yeah, you just saw Family Computer on this, Nintendo on the bottom. Nintendo Family Computer, also abbreviated as, what is abbreviated right? I don't know. Also sometimes referred to as the Famicom. Yeah, check out that controller. That's a Player 2 controller because it doesn't have start and select on it. Why? Permanently wired. That seems weird. That is weird. But considering the time that the console originated from, I'll get into that later. Alright. Yeah, there we go. It's HDMI cable and USB. Check it out. There they are. USB, you're thinking? Why USB? Well, you gotta power the system somehow. Yeah, it takes power through a USB cable. Yeah, damn it. Anyway, here, there's the Player 1 controller. It has start and select. So there's the device. Okay, now talking about the wired controllers, I'll explain a little bit about the idea of wired controllers and consoles later. Check this out. A Sega SG-1000, not really getting it on camera good, but there it is. Has 2 controller ports. The main competitor for the Nintendo Famicom when it first released before Sega released the Mark III, because there was 2 marks of the original SG-1000. Now, I'll get into the controllers later. The tiny controllers on this thing match the size of it, so that's why they're so small and they're not as big as the ones that came with the NES Classic. And the system originally came with controllers that were permanently wired to it. in Japan. At least that was common for some Japanese consoles at the time. Yep, that happened. And attaching your controllers to the side of Japanese consoles also was an idea that existed at the time. So the small controllers that are permanently wired to this thing have a reason. They're keeping everything in scale with the size of the unit. But you know what? Here they are. Those controllers. They're not that bad. I mean, I wish they were bigger. But you know what? Surprisingly well. How well these tiny controllers can fit in your hand. And I mean, if you can handle like some of the Game Boy systems, not that bad. Not that bad. But yeah, this is a cool little piece of hardware. And I haven't really taken a look at too many of the games within it yet. And like I said, this is a volume 0 because I haven't gotten around to taking a look at a whole lot in this yet. And I'll make a video of what I think of the games in it and how interesting of a selection of the Nintendo Multiverse this thing is portraying. Whatever, you know, the usual thing where I talk about the interesting worlds of video games. So yeah, this is it. This is the box. That's the console. This is what you get. And this is volume 0 because I'm not spending much time talking about the games within it. So yeah, I'm planning to do a video in the future where I actually talk about the games in it and my opinions on them. And you know what? The Nintendo Entertainment System is a console that played a role in getting me interested in video games. And the Famicom, or Family Computer, is the Japanese original version of the Nintendo Entertainment System. So this is an important part of video game history to me, in a way. I'm more interested in the classic Super Nintendo console than I was the NES Classic. But Nintendo, along with ColecoVision and the adapter to play Atari 2600 games, and an old Commodore 64 computer that I loved playing in elementary school, those were the things that really got me into video games. And I started with Atari games and Coleco, and wanting a Commodore 64 computer, and the Nintendo Entertainment System kind of met my needs with games like the first Ninja Turtles games and the Legend of Zelda games, the more story-based games, games like Ghostbusters, which actually wasn't that great on the Nintendo Entertainment System, but was way better on the Sega Master System. And I almost got a Sega Master System, but then I discovered it had less games, and both Nintendo and Sega had Ghostbusters, but you know, whatever. But anyway, yeah, Nintendo Entertainment System, and thus also the Famicom, are an important part of video game history to me. And yeah, but anyway, that's what you get in the box. This is the console, whatever. I still have more to say, so the video's not over yet. Okay, here we have the Famicom Mini. Well, the Nintendo Family Computer, a miniature version of it. Setting right here on this lint-covered blanket. Yeah, it's not the best looking blanket, but whatever. And here's the controller. And a mess of wires. Alright. Yeah. Anyway, the controllers, you might notice, are absurdly small, but that's to fit the miniaturized size of this thing. Yeah, if you had purchased, or if I had purchased, the Nintendo Entertainment System Mini, the controllers would have been the proper size. Yeah, there. Yeah, that's pretty small. But this is so that these controllers can fit on the system. Yeah, this system has the feature of the controllers actually attaching onto the system. And while Nintendo may have revolutionized the idea of putting the start button on the controller, you know, so you can pause the game without reaching over and pressing a button on the console, that's just player 1, not player 2. See that controller plug right there? Yeah, for the Wii Classic controller. Well, it's a similar plug on the NES Classic's controllers that allow it to be plugged into the system. Thus, I guess, making that system a little bit compatible with some of the accessories for the Wii. Not a bad idea. I'm sure some people wish the original controllers would have plugged into the NES Classic, but no, it's more of a contemporary controller plug.
that was just like on this Wii controller. Now, the Famicom, keeping, I guess, in line with how the original Japanese Nintendo Entertainment System, known as the Family Computer, worked, these controllers are permanently wired to the system. No plugging and unplugging of those controllers. That's not unique to the Nintendo Famicom, even if it seems odd. The very first generation of video game consoles was basically the generation of the Magnavox Odyssey and the Atari Pong devices, which includes devices such as this Coleco, Telstar Alpha, and this Matel Electronics Auto Race. Yeah, and of course with devices like this, the controls are built right onto the console. Nothing too special about that. And that was considered the first generation of video games. The second generation of video games began with the Fairchild Channel F, which had interchangeable cartridges with all that read-only memory data on the cartridge. And as far as I know, the Fairchild Channel F, its controllers, while connected to the system with a wire, those were controllers that were permanently wired to the system. To the best of my knowledge, I could be wrong about that. I'm not super up on the Fairchild Channel F, but it had wired controllers that are permanently wired to the device. Yeah, I looked it up. That was correct. The Fairchild Channel F had its controllers permanently wired to the console, though there was a later version of the system, the Fairchild Channel F2, that revised the hardware so that the controllers could be unplugged and plugged back into the console. So that seems kind of odd, but that's an early video game system concept to have your controls permanently attached to the device. After the Fairchild Channel F was created, along came the Atari Video Computer System. Yeah, this was where it really kind of started. You finally had games published by other developers. Well, Atari published games by developers other than Atari. Finally, of course, Atari made a lot of their own games. And there are even third-party publishers that came along in this era. The Atari Video Computer System, later known as the Atari 2600, that kind of really started what we think of as a contemporary video game system. It even had, the controllers could be unplugged. It even had unpluggable controllers, such as right now I have not only a Sega controller plugged into this thing, but an Atari control pad plugged into this system. Yeah. So, if one were to learn from the Atari 2600, being able to unplug your video game controllers was just a good idea. Yeah, perhaps you should have learned that, Nintendo Family Computer. Okay, here we have a Sega SG-1000 with a Sega Master System controller and Sega SG-1000 controller, two different Sega controllers plugged into it. Oh, the wires. Oh, look at all the wires. So many wires. So many wires, so many problems. Well, actually, as much as the problem with wires, so many problems with wires, but at the same time, I'd rather wires over wireless, because I really hate dealing with batteries and recharging stuff and all that. But yeah, here we have the SG-1000 with two different controllers plugged into it. Yes, plugged into it. But before you think I'm picking on the Nintendo system, it's worth mentioning that is the revised SG-1000, the SG-1000 II. The original version of the SG-1000, released on the exact same day as the Nintendo Famicom in Japan, had a wired controller for controller 1. That is, a wired controller as in permanently wired, not just that it was merely connected to the control, or not merely connected to the console with a wire, but permanently wired to the console. The controller was permanently wired to the console for controller 1. The Player 1 controller was permanently wired to the system for some crazy reason in the first model of the SG-1000. Just Player 2 had the Atari style plug that made the controller interchangeable. Player 1 was stuck with the same controller. Controller 1 was wired to the original version of the SG-1000 hardware, just like the Famicom or Family Computer. So that is not unique to Nintendo. And Sega, actually one thing that was cool about Sega, they used the exact same style plugs as Atari did, and they continued to use that for quite some time, making many of their controllers interchangeable with later game systems, as well as with Atari systems and Coleco systems, and it was just good. Sega made good controllers. I like those controllers. But yeah, the SG-1000, the competitor released on the same day as the Family Computer, also had a wired controller, but they revised the hardware, and then you have this. Those two controller plugs. Another characteristic of the Nintendo Family Computer was how the controllers would kind of set on and attach to the system. Well, the SG-1000 played around with that idea as well. Yep. There are some things that are just kind of unique about Japanese video game systems from that time. One was their lack of willingness to learn from Atari and use video game controller ports to make it so you can unplug your video game controllers. I mean, a permanently wired controller is just a bad idea. But another thing that's unique is just attaching the controller to the system itself when not in use. That's kind of interesting. I really like how Sega played around with circular directional pads. I like that. But that said, when you're dealing with a really tiny controller, the plus-shaped directional pad might help a bit, I think. I've used them both a lot. I think most people are used to the plus shape now, and I think for a tiny directional pad it helps to be plus shaped, but if it's a more reasonable size, I think it actually feels better to have a round directional pad. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfectly round, and it's always good to have a raised plus shape within the round circle. But anyway, what I was really going to say is something about these old 8-bit Japanese video game systems. It's kind of odd how the controller wires just stick off the side of them. It kind of is a little bit in the way. It's not as bad as it looks, but that does seem odd. But when they came to North America, then they started putting the wires out of the top. So that kind of gets the wire out of the way a bit. But I just find it kind of odd that the wire just sticks out of the side like that. Considering how you hold on to these controllers, it does look like it would be in the way, and it is a little bit, but it's not as bad as it looks. Still, it's kind of an oddity about Japanese video game systems from that time. By the time the system came to North America as the Nintendo Entertainment System, both Sega and Nintendo learned you want the wire to come out of the top of the controller. That's a better spot for the wire to come out. It's just obvious. It just seems so obvious. But yeah, check it out. The wires stick out of the side of the controllers. That's not surprising to me because I've played with Japanese controllers from the time period before, but it does seem kind of odd. It is kind of unique to the time and the nation of origin for those controllers. Here's another oddity. This is definitely a bit of an oddity. To me, it's kind of strange, but whatever. How do you power the mini Famicom, or the mini Nintendo Family Computer? Well, there's a wire coming out of this thing that powers it, and this is what the plug looks like. Yeah, that's USB. You plug it into a USB power source to power the device. Yeah. Why wouldn't it just come with a normal power plug that you plug into the wall? I mean, that's manageable. But I don't know, I just find that strange. I mean, maybe one day in the distant future, household outlets will be USB plugs in the far future, in which case this device will be ahead of its time. But I just think that's kind of odd. Given the well-established nature of the device, obviously this little Nintendo family computer will not take Famicom cartridges like the full-sized original version would, because I plugged the USB cable that comes with this into various computers of mine and even the Xbox 360, and all of those devices had trouble powering it for an extended period of time. Excuse me. An extended period of time. It acted like it wasn't getting enough power, and every now and then would turn itself off, and it would be hard to get it to start up again. And yeah, it's pretty power consuming for a device that is powered off of USB. I think a lot of people say if you get an iPhone charger that plugs into the wall, those tend to work really well with this, but why wouldn't they give it a normal electrical plug? It really should have had one. But other than that, it's a pretty cool device with some interesting old games on it. Sadly, no Zaxxon. But if they ever make a Sega SG-1000 Mini... Alright, so the video's pretty much over, but we failed to peer into the universe of any of the Nintendo games on this device. So this is going to be an episode 0, or volume 0, or whatever. So this episode 0, I'll have to do an episode 1 to really achieve what I wanted, and maybe an episode 2 to follow it up. So in the future I'll do more videos talking about this device and the games within it. So that'll happen sometime after I get a proper way of powering up the device. So let's make a little more effort to jump into the universe of a video game. Let's just take a look at something. Alright, so we'll jump into the universe of, well, let's take a look at the 31-in-1 for the Nintendo Famicom with a game converter to play it on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Yeah, so you can play it in North America on a North American system, yeah, well, there's Pac-Man, misspelled as Pac-Man, and of course, for some reason called Goblin here. But he does fight ghosts, or eat ghosts. He does gobble things down, so goblins, gobbling. I can kind of get that. Anyway, back to this. This video is pretty much over. Feel free to check out more of my videos. I think that would be just great. If you manage to watch this long into this video, you might actually enjoy some of my other videos. So how about you pick another one of my videos to watch after watching a couple seconds of me playing Pac-Man, and then quickly pick a video to watch.